And now we're connecting live to Melbourne, Australia for our first speakers. And now we're connecting live to Melbourne, Australia. Um, with them, we will explore something that a lot of people take for granted. We will, um, if we are in Bulgaria or anywhere in the developed world, we have access to thousands of children books that we can buy at any bookstore. We take that for granted, but this is not necessarily true for the third world. If you are a kid in Rwanda or Haiti, you have a very limited access to children's books in your mother tongue. So what we are aiming to do with the next presentation is share with you how technology can help solve the literacy problem in the developing world. To that end, I am very pleased to announce Taniya Alexander and Michael Ross, who are representatives of Naboo and will share their journey on that end. Taniya and Michael, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Boyan. Before I begin, I just want to make a note of why we're here today. We've actually worked with Astea and their amazing team for a number of years now. And in fact, they are responsible for helping us develop one of our key products, our low bandwidth mobile application, which really helps us do the amazing work that we do in the literacy space. So I just want to begin by saying a very heartfelt thank you to Astea, and in particular to the talented team that works with us for being so committed and spectacular at what you do. And also thank you for giving us this platform to speak. So as Boyan mentioned, I'm Taniya Alexander, and I am the co-founder and head of global operations at NABU. NABU's a New York headquartered global not-for-profit organization with country offices around the world, including in Australia, Haiti, Rwanda, Kenya, and most recently the Philippines as well. To start, I might just speak briefly about my background and how I became involved in the vision of NABU. I'm a child of Sri Lankan parents who fled ethnic persecution and moved to Australia when I was just 2 years old. Given the lack of educational opportunities in Sri Lanka, education was everything to my parents. They worked hard to send us to really good schools and spent hours tutoring myself and my sisters every single night. Straight A's were never good enough for my parents. When I came home and showed them my grades, they'd always say, "What happened to the plus?" So NABU's work really resonated with me because I had been brought up, really knowing how privileged I was to have an education. But the pinnacle moment for me was a few months into my work with NABU. For weeks, I'd been really engrossed in my work in Haiti and working with our Haitian team to build partnerships with local language publishers and schools. But late one night, I was flicking through some books in Creole when I flicked straight to a page that completely floored me. And looking down, I saw myself, a brown girl with black hair and brown eyes, staring back at me from those pages. And I felt as though I had just been punched in the stomach, but in the best way possible. This girl, she looked exactly like me. And I had this stunning realization that before that night, I actually had never seen myself reflected in a storybook before. I was 27 years old at the time when I realized the power of that moment. Imagine if every child could see themselves reflected in the storybooks that they were reading. There would be little room for self-doubt and more room for confidence and high self-esteem. And from that moment, I started to make NABU's work my reality. I became obsessed with it. And I moved from Melbourne, Australia to New York in 2015 and to join that founding team. And I never looked back. The funny part is I'm actually back in Australia at the moment, unable to leave because of the coronavirus restrictions, but hopefully government policies will change in the next couple of months and international travel will be permitted again. So without further ado, what is NABU all about? At Naboo, our mission is to solve the global literacy crisis so every single child around the world can read and rise to their full potential. So research shows that access to mother tongue storybooks at the early grades is actually one of the most cost-effective interventions in helping children learn how to read and bridge to literacy in any language. Unfortunately, though, 40% of children globally don't actually have access to books in a language they speak or understand. And this is driving a global illiteracy crisis, which impacts about 250 million children around the world. So these kids aren't learning the basics of reading and writing, and so they drop out of school or basically become unemployable and are caught in a cycle of poverty. Tied to this as well is that research shows that children's self-actualization is actually tied to their cultural representation, how much they see themselves in what they're reading. So when children learn to read in their own language and see themselves in the books that they are reading, they're actually more likely to develop a love of reading and then go on to finish school, gain employment, and lead successful lives. So what we do is we work with local communities to create collections of culturally relevant mother tongue storybooks. And then we have a proven tech-based approach to do this, which will actually help us achieve our vision of ensuring every child has equitable access to literacy by 2030, and that's in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our theory of change, it's groundbreaking because it's holistic in nature. We really don't leave any stone unturned here, and it really comes full circle as well. So firstly, through this authentic book creation lab, we hire and train local creators on a step-by-step process of publishing complete collections of culturally relevant mother tongue books. The context and the illustrations in the stories that we create are representative of the children who read them, which actually draws children to our books and helps develop their love of reading. I mentioned leveling because the stories we create are also leveled to national curriculums so that kids learn to read in a very progressive and developmental way. Parents and children can then access these storybooks for free on any low-cost mobile device through our naboo.org reading app, which has been configured for low bandwidth and offline environments. This is really key because if we look at the breadth of which smartphones usage and accessibility is growing around the world, we know this is the way of the future. Hard copy books, while they're still valuable and while they're still interesting, they take a lot of money and resources to distribute in these communities. But the data doesn't lie, and as mobile internet coverage zones continue to grow exponentially and the cost of smartphones continues to decrease, we've realized that this is the most efficient way to make every child have access to storybooks at their fingertips. Finally, through our Bridge to Literacy program, we have trained and incentivized over 2,000 community-based reading ambassadors. And they are all around the world, basically supporting families with our app and instilling that love of reading in their children at home. So in essence, this is the crux of what we do at Naboo. It's creating culturally relevant content, distributing that content on devices that are already available to communities for free, and then engagement, which is teaching the community to use the app and providing incentives for doing this. And we use technology through every step of the way. In the past 12 months, we've been able to create 156 stories with local artists in East Africa through our signature story creation program. I'll hand the mic over to our talented creative director who runs this process globally soon, so he can explain this process in more detail. But COVID really forced us to, stop and iterate our processes. And what we found that it wasn't as challenging as we thought it would be because we were already such a tech-driven organization. Through the holistic model, our stories have reached over 1 million children and families across Rwanda, Kenya, Haiti, and the Pacific Islands. In fact, we have the fastest growing educational app in Rwanda at the moment with over 670,000 readers. And we're on track to reaching 1 million readers by the end of the year. This is remarkable given Rwanda's population is only about 12 million, which means we're going to have reached 1/12 of Rwanda's population really soon. Our engagement with users of our app has also increased immensely over the last 12 months, which is extremely exciting when we think about how quickly we can reach other communities where there is a need as well. So this is just a quick statistics page on what our reach has been in Rwanda. So as you can see, 753,000 families are reading with over 79,000 daily users and 7 million pages turned. And the cool thing is that Astea has helped us build out the back end of our app so that it collects data in real time. The data is fed onto our online dashboard, so we're able to measure our impact live. Now onto the matter of COVID. So here are some photographs of what life was like pre-COVID. Naboo's life was fun, so to speak. Work life was fun. It was face-to-face, interactive, and dare I say it, really exciting. As I mentioned, we have teams around the world. We traveled frequently to visit our programs. Working from the office and cafes was always a good time. And, we hosted an abundance of signature writing workshops and events over the years. And we were really extremely invigorated by the day-to-day of our work because it was very social. But the universe, as we know, it had different plans. And enter March 2022, and as you know, the world was thrown into chaos, and we had a very new, very scary pandemic on our hands. And we had to quickly pause as an organization and step back and think about our place in this new disconnected world where being social was no longer the norm, but social distancing sadly was. So in terms of the distribution of our app and engaging new users to read from our app, we had to get creative. Before lockdown, we had a thriving ambassador program, which I mentioned before, where we incentivize young ambassadors to get out onto the streets of Haiti, Kenya, and Rwanda, and to really teach young people, parents, and teachers how to use that app and the benefits of reading with their children or younger siblings. But we couldn't use our ambassador model anymore because no one could leave their homes during the coronavirus. Instead, we had to look at our individual markets and we had to analyze the different sorts of marketing campaigns and strategies that we could capitalize on in those markets. So in Rwanda, we found that radio had 95% coverage and was the most useful tool to disseminate information. So what do? We ran massive media campaigns and competitions on the radio to increase our user base. We also ran TV advertisements and worked with social media influencers to market our app and stories. Although our ambassadors couldn't go out onto the streets, we still wanted to use their skill in some way. So instead of paying them to network outside, we paid them to network inside and helped grow our ambassador program by making cold phone calls to organizations and potential partners that we could work with. So as you can see, we had to make key changes in the way that we did things and the way we operated. And COVID impacted every single element of our organization, from events, which moved from in-person to online, and also operations, where we had to find ways to help our global team feel more connected in this new world of such disconnection. Another way that things changed for us programmatically was in the way that we created our culturally relevant storybooks with communities around the world. And this is where I am excited to introduce you all to our very talented and artistic creative director, Michael Russ. Michael is the brainchild behind our new and exciting story creation process at Naboo, and there's no one better to speak to how COVID-19 has changed the way we do story creation, which is a very key programmatic piece of Naboo's theory of change. So take it away, Michael.
Thanks, Tan, and hi everyone. It's so wonderful to be here, and I'd also just like to echo Taniya's gratitude towards Astea and the team for all your incredible work and for having us here today. So I'm Michael, and I'm the creative director at Naboo. I oversee our entire book and content creation process, and I work with a global team of 30 staff to see our books come to life. Interestingly, however, I'm actually an architect and an artist. I joined Naboo in 2019, and prior to joining Naboo, I was working with the artist Ai Weiwei, and I was living in Beijing and Berlin, which is where he was based. So I've always loved a good story, and soon after returning to Australia, my path took me to Naboo. Currently, we're operating in Haiti, Rwanda, Kenya, and we're in the process of establishing new creative programs in Australia, West Africa, and Southeast Asia. However, when I first started working at NABU in 2019, it was the pre-COVID era. I began by training just one illustrator in Haiti. In 2020, we expanded our operations in Rwanda, and I had a trip planned to go there in March to meet my growing team. But then COVID hit and everything changed. My trip was cancelled, and we had to think really quickly about what we needed to do, not only to survive as a technology enabled publisher, but also to continue growing and to meet the increasing demands for online learning, which is a result of COVID. So we came up with the idea of creating a collection of books responding to COVID and teaching children about it. We called it the Health Collection. This collection demonstrated to us the importance of being able to respond to events quickly and also the strength in being adaptable. Our health collection reached over millions of children all over the world, and that's just, something so incredible in the times of COVID, where it's really what children needed, and they needed to learn about this as well as understand the emotional impacts of isolation. Looking now at where my team is today and how we've learned to operate with COVID just being everywhere, I like to highlight the fact that this time last year, we had 5 illustrators and 1 editor. Now I lead a team of 25 illustrators, 10 authors, 2 editors, and 2 translators. So my team has literally grown by 600%, but the strangest thing is I haven't met one of my team members in person. This growth was only possible through the creation of the ABC Lab, or the Authentic Book Creation Lab. The ABC Lab is our creative program that keeps me connected with my team. It's my way of overcoming the rapidly changing connectivity issues we're all facing around the world, especially as international organizations. The ABC Lab, in many ways, feeds 2 birds with 1 seed. For example, it enables us to fulfill our mission in creating incredible, culturally sensitive content that's not only accessible, but also authentic and relatable, as Tan was mentioning. And second, it helps me stay connected with my team in an increasingly disconnected world. We do this by having multiple creative workshops every week with clear agendas to connect on, allowing time for both a personal and workplace discussion to manifest. We talk about things in common, such as interests, passions, family, and children, and then we use these conversations to inspire creativity in our work. I'm just going to share with you a quick video. The result of these conversations and these dialogues that we have helps produce our finished books. I'm able to connect with my staff and my team on a deeply personal level. And even though I've never met them in person, and even though culturally we have vastly different experiences, we're able to produce something that is uniquely beautiful. And we do this by bringing together our similarities and also our different perspectives. So here you can see the creation process in time-lapse form of how our illustrations are formed, how they're created, from the initial sketch, which represents the idea, the inception of the illustration, all the way through to the completed immersive scene, which children can then immerse themselves in and become part of this fantastical worlds we create in our stories. This whole process, of course, is only possible in a digital world because Without internet, without online calling, Zoom, Google Meet, whatever you use, none of this would be able to happen. And here are just a few of our finished books on the right. And on the left, we can see examples of how we do markups. It's a little bit small perhaps, but you can see in some of the screenshots will be in a Zoom call, and an illustrator will present an illustration, and then we'll go through and draw over it, mark it up, and then cross-reference the visual illustration with the text that the illustration is an expression of. So the creation process of creating the books includes the following steps. I use these steps to structure the creation of our books and to provide inspiration and allow our team to organically evolve the ideas through creativity, giving our illustrators and our authors a unique voice, which we help shine a light on through this process. This has helped grow the quality and quantity of our product in a post-COVID lockdown world. It's an example of how IP, which we've had to develop as a result of COVID, has enabled us to continue growing while physically we're not able to be in the same room. COVID has, in so many ways, just completely changed how we operate. Tan's already mentioned a few, but I'll speak really specifically about the creative team. For instance, our studio space in Kigali in Rwanda has been empty for months. But we've also been able to find ways of using restrictions from COVID, such as lockdown, to our advantage. For example, we're able to save costs on writing and illustration workshops because they're all online now. So we don't need to deal with venue and catering hires. But on the other side, this has also brought us challenges, because with everyone working from home, how do we know that they're spending their working hours honestly? How do we know that they're working 8 hours a week or however hours they're paid to work? So here lies, I guess, the two main takeaways in moving forward in a post-COVID world without hindering growth and success and what we foster at Naboo. The first point is trust. Trusting team members is something really, or trusting team members with something important to you may put you in a position of feeling vulnerable, but it also thrusts onto your team a sense of responsibility. And this can be extremely empowering, especially at times when we're not all in the office, so we feel disconnected from the organization. The next point is being accessible. So with a global team, I want to be as supportive and reachable as possible within, of course, reasonable working hours and non-working life. So I make a concerted effort to ensure that this is the ongoing homeostasis of my operations with my team. And this helps my team feel supported. It instills in them greater confidence, and this then overall boosts performance. So I guess that, in reflecting on all of this and where we're at now in the world, in COVID, in all our countries, Australia, we're completely locked down. I would say that one thing we like to always be mindful of is just to always try to be prepared for change. But I also understand that this is somewhat of a paradox because we can't all see into the future. So beneath this, I think the meaning is to find opportunities in unsettling times and circumstances. such as creating a health collection in response to COVID, which is what we did. Because in the end, I think that it's this responding like this which helps us overcome disruptions, and brings us together as a workplace. And I really feel so strongly that there's never a situation where creativity and ideas are not able to emerge, even in the darkest of times. Sometimes it's the darkest of times which brings our minds together. We have a collective, I guess, agitation which sparks some sort of idea and imagination, and from there, incredible things can emerge and be created. So thank you all very much for listening and seeing my presentation. And now I'd love to hand back to Taniya.
Taniya, you are mute.
Sorry, apologies. Thank you, Boyan. Thank you so much, Michael, for that amazing overview of what our story creation looked like pre-COVID and what it looks like now. Before we close out our presentation, I think the most important thing to take away is that COVID has brought about many challenges around the world, to businesses and non-for-profits, in terms of how they operate and execute their mission. But what's clear from this is that the world will continue to change and evolve and go through many different seasons, and sometimes they're scary seasons, whether we like it or not. And what's key in that is how adaptable and resilient we are to change as individuals, of course, but also as organizations. For Naboo in particular, this phase of COVID-19 is difficult. We miss our colleagues, we miss travel, and we sometimes miss our old, more connected ways of doing things. But there's also been some good that's come from having to step back and rethink and iterate the way that we do things. We're constantly thinking about how to run our programs more efficiently and how to become more sustainable and far-reaching through technology. And being forced into a corner when the pandemic hit, it really forced us to have to get our act together really quickly and be more innovative when it came to some of the strategies that we had been thinking about for some time. So thank you once again for everyone tuning into this presentation and listening in. We hope you enjoyed it, and please feel free to reach out by email that's on this slide. We're always looking for new partnerships and opportunities, and if you think you would be interested in becoming a partner or becoming invested in our work somehow, we would love to hear from you. Thank you once again.
Thank you both for this wonderful presentation. Our audience, I think, is really impressed by the work that you do, and we have a few questions coming in. Marina asks, when creating books in the native language of a country, have you met any challenges with local dialects or cases where there are multiple official languages?
Tan, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take this?
Go ahead if you're comfortable. I'm happy to take it, or whatever. You go ahead, Michael. You're leading the content process.
Thanks for the question. We're always finding challenges. There's always going to be something new, something that hasn't been done before yet, and we have to kind of create a new precedent. When we're dealing with new languages, the language is so complicated. There are so many layers to a language. Embedded in a language, there is history and culture and just thousands of years of tradition. And so it's so important for us. We have such a big responsibility in what we do because we want to do it properly. We want to respect the language and the people that we're creating books for. And so that's why it's so important for us to, when we're working to do this, we set up our creative laboratory, our ABC lab, in whatever country we're creating the books for, and we ensure that we have a number of really experienced professionals, local professionals, guiding us and helping to create this content in the language that is needed. And yeah, languages they also evolve and change, and they're constantly changing, and there's also many different types and styles of language. So one challenge we've found is we sometimes, in one language, there could be an older style, a newer style, and we need to make sure that our research is really comprehensive so that we know which style we need to translate our books into, what language we need to write them in, and the translations of it, so that they're relevant and they're correct and accurate. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. So thanks for your detailed explanation. Another question that we have is, first of all, congratulations for growing your team and keeping it together and motivated. How do you keep yourself happy personally as you're not meeting the children yourself? I imagine that this is something you truly miss.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, you can speak to, I guess, not having visited one of our programs once I'm done, but that's been extremely challenging, particularly for me, Boyan. So basically, when we started and when I was over in New York, I would take at least 2 or 3 trips a year to go and visit the schools that we were working in, visit the families, visit the program, and it really kept it real. You could sit behind a desk and do the operational work or the financial work and all of that, but visiting a program in person was the most, I guess, heartwarming thing that we did, and it really helped us see the impact that we were making on the ground and kept us inspired and motivated to do the work when we were back behind a desk. And that's probably been the most challenging thing, that we haven't been able to travel and go back and forth and visit our programs. But one way that we have countered this is actually in terms of the collection of user stories, for example, on the ground. So we have local teams in the countries that we're operating from, and they regularly go out onto the field and work with our user base to collect stories on how Naboo has actually impacted the literacy of children. So we get testimonies from children, from parents, from teachers, and we've found incredible things. And children have said that they feel more inspired now, that they are they dream bigger. Parents are saying that they're spending more time with their children. They're saying that they're more invested in their child's education than ever, because in the home, the children is reading from their phones, so they often sit next to their children while they read. So it's also opening conversations within families and within schools. So seeing those user stories, seeing those video and photographic testimonies, that's what's helping us get through at the moment. But I will say that we're very much looking forward, especially being here in Australia at the moment with the world's harshest lockdown. We are looking very much forward to traveling again and visiting our program countries. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thanks. Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. As Tam was saying, I mean, actually, I haven't met like 90%, I'd say like 80%, no, 90% of the Naboo team I haven't actually met in person. And I've been working at Naboo since the beginning of 2019. So it is hard, but it's a reality at the moment, an unfortunate reality we have to face, and just try to make the best of what we currently have. And so, I'm really fortunate to have Taniya here with me in Melbourne. And, we speak nearly every day, and unless the days we're sick of each other. But yeah, so I mean, that's really great. I think what helps is making really taking care of the relationships you are able to take care of, when it comes to your team, where you're in the same place.
Okay, thanks. And a final question from Dimitar from our audience. Awesome work. Do the books come as digital only, or do you also ship out physical copies? And also, what are your plans for future expansion?
go ahead, Michael, with the first part, and I'll answer the expansion part.
Okay, so just really quickly, the books are both digital and print. So all of our content is available on our Naboo app, which is and it's just being updated. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a fantastic app, and all our content can be reached on there if you just search for Naboo.org in the Google Play Store and on the Apple App Store. It's going to be launched soon, very soon. And for our print books, they're available through ordering and also through partnerships where we'll have a partner who wants to print X amount of books and distribute them in a certain area. So that's another way our books, I guess, physical version copies of the books are created.
Yeah, they're available on also the Naboo. If you go to the our website, actually, we have a bookstore. So yeah, you can also find them there. Now, in terms of expansion as well, so this is a really exciting part, and something that coincided with my trip back to Australia was, really setting up our operations here in Australia and looking after our Asia Pacific scale. So the next steps, what we've done is we've done a lot of research into what the most underserved languages in the world are at the moment. And we've identified that Swahili, spoken in East Africa, Hausa, spoken in West Africa, Filipino, Tagalog, spoken in the Philippines. Interestingly, the Philippines has a very high literacy rate, but one of the biggest literacy inequality rates in the world. And also Tamil, spoken in Sri Lanka, India, and across other Southeast Asian countries. They're the most underserved language groups. So our next plan, or our 5-year plan, is to create collections of 160 leveled storybooks in these languages and distribute these stories through our app in the countries where these languages are spoken the most. As Michael indicated before, we've already started our program in Kenya through COVID and seen massive success. So, and we've actually just incorporated in the Philippines now as well to begin our scale there. So we're really excited about that. We're also thinking about running living language workshops. So one thing that we have identified, or one opportunity identified, is that there are hundreds of Indigenous languages spoken around the world that are becoming extinct because there's no way to capture that storytelling that's so very important to keeping those Indigenous languages alive. So through our living language workshops, we're actually going to be working with Indigenous communities as well, starting here in Australia, to create these storybooks so that we can capture the Dreamtime stories, cultures and traditions and ensure that these languages live on.
Okay, looks really inspiring, and I'm looking forward to this. What I ask every speaker at the end of their talk is to finish a sentence. Software development is
the key to our future.
Software development is the bridge to human connectivity.
Thank you both so much. It was an absolute pleasure. And to our audience, we'll be back in a minute with our next speaker.